Okay, let's start. Welcome again to the fifth session of the Virtual Learning Exchanges for CTI-CFF under the EU Ocean Governance Project. So this session is devoted to the presentation of a new tool for marine protected areas management. Specifically, this is a tool for the inclusion of marine mammals protection in the management of MPAs. So I'm glad to introduce you, my colleague Francis Top, which coordinates the marine mammals twinning in the context of the EU Ocean Governance Project. And he will be in charge of moderating and introducing the different speakers and moderating as well the discussion. So, Francis, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much, Puri. Can you all hear me well?
Yes, all is good.
Okay, thank you very much. Tom, can you share the presentation, please, if you don't mind? So good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you for joining another online meeting. So this session, as Puri mentioned, is going to be on marine mammals protection. We have a very busy agenda with 5 presentations. What I like about the agenda and the presentation is we are going to hear from speakers from activities at different levels. So we'll have some presentations that are really specific at the site level. We have some presentations at national level, but we have also some presentations that will approach the conservation of marine mammals at the regional level. So which is good. So I'm going. Can you put the next slide and the next slide? Next one. Next one. Next one. Thank you. So I'm going to very briefly present you the objective of the twinning on marine mammals. So as mentioned, as it was mentioned by Puri in her short introduction, this twinning is one of the activities of the EU-funded project on ocean governance. The twinning was created back in 2016. The main objective of the twinning are to build technical capacities for MPA manager by sharing knowledge, expertise, and good practice, to provide MPA manager with a toolbox that will be presented to you just after my short presentation, and to create a network of peers that could provide assistance to other managers on an ad hoc basis. Also, we are going to promote all our work for the next 2 years. And finally, one thing we are going to try, it's based on the use of the self-assessment tool. We would like to try to draw some conclusion based on this assessment. Next slide, Tom, please. So currently, we have about 10 partners of this twinning. So I will see on the screen, we have different level of engagement. So it's ever from the MPA. So we have the Agua sanctuaries in the Caribbean. We have Irwas Marine Park on the French Brittany. We have Azores Marine Park. So we have MPA. We have national entities such as the government of Ministry of Agriculture for Cape Verde, or government or Ministry of Natural Resources for Bermuda. Or we have also like university, or for instance, another EU-funded project, which is called the Caribbean Project, which is a project in the Caribbean. So I will now hand over to Tom. So Tom has been very involved in the development of the Marine Mammals Online Toolkit, and especially the self-assessment tool. So within the next few slides, he's going to present, to give you a more in-depth presentation of the tool. Thank you very much. Tom, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Francis. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, everybody. It's my pleasure to introduce you to the Marine Mammal Management Toolkit that, as Francis has said, we've been developing over the past year or so. So there's various components to the toolkit, which I will give you a quick run through, and then hopefully I will come out of presentation mode and just give you a quick introduction to the platform and how it looks online and the various tools that you will have at your disposal. So firstly, the toolkit is mainly composed of three components, and one of those components is the fact sheets. And we've designed the fact sheets to provide MPA managers, policymakers, and anybody that is interested in the conservation of marine mammals with important information, useful information, resources, and links to other actions and other activities that are ongoing in regards to the conservation of marine mammals. So the fact sheets at the moment contain 23 developed fact sheets, which are available online through the platform, and they're also available to download as PDF as well, so they can be applied in the field and offline. Each component in the fact sheet is designed to work in tandem with the other components. So the fact sheets support the self-assessment tool, which we'll go into a second, and vice versa. The fact sheets are developed through 5 core themes, and we're looking at the management framework of marine protected areas. How do we address particular activities and threats, research and monitoring, outreach and engagement, and then management effectiveness. And within those 5 core themes, fact sheets include MPA management with respect to marine mammals, looking at zoning permitting, managing noise, entanglement, bycatch, and how do we share data, and what's the importance of education and awareness campaigns. Although we have 23 at the moment, we are looking to increase that number, and there are other fact sheets that we're looking to develop as well, which include such as climate change and marine mammals, and the role that marine mammals can play within the climate change nexus. So just to give you an example, just a clearer overview of those 5 core themes, and you can see where those 23 fact sheets sit. And depending on the stage of your MPA, or depending on your assessment, one core theme might be more valuable at this time than others, or you might specifically have certain activities that occur within or around your MPA, such as whale watching and tourism activities that you feel that could be improved, and would like further information on. Within each fact sheet, this is a presentation of the fact sheet as it looks online. So as I said, you can access it online, or you can download it offline for PDF. So we have a general introduction, and then normally, but it is dictated by the contents of the fact sheet, we have some core themes with critical information that can be applied to marine protected areas. And these fact sheets are regularly updated. They're evolving as science evolves, as new actions or new conservation techniques evolve. So do our fact sheets as well. And within each fact sheet, we then also have case studies. So we can provide you with all the information, but it's also important to understand how that information is applied in the field through case studies. And we're working to develop each fact sheet, have its own case study as well. And we also link out to useful resources and references for further reading, for further application also. Very quickly, we have a new section on the platform. And depending on the style of news or the content of that news article, they are also linked to the various fact sheets as well automatically. So not only can you read the general overview topic of the fact sheet, but you can also see the latest news, what's happening in real time. So following on from the fact sheets, we have the self-assessment tool. There isn't a lot on this slide because, as I said, I'm hopefully going to jump off quickly and show you how it's used online. But the self-assessment tool has been designed as sort of the central core of the toolkit, and it is a tool that will enable marine protected area managers to assess their MPA. So really finding where those barriers to success are, where the MPA is performing well, and also highlighting areas where resources could be redirected. So you may find within the MPA management plan that marine mammals aren't well considered in respect to tourism activities, or you may find that they're well served within addressing other activities adjacent to the MPA, whether that's managing for noise, or that is ensuring or minimizing fishing activities to reduce bycatch or entanglement. So the self-assessment tool, we have two forms of the tool. We have an Excel-based tool, which is available to download and utilize offline. And we've recently just developed a web-based tool. This is on the platform and it is online, and it's a bit more interactive. And there's some nice functions within this web-based tool that aren't necessarily available on the Excel tool. That's further downloading your results. We're aiming to look at re-uploading data, so you can undertake assessments over a certain period of time rather in one go. Both toolkits will be translated, further increasing that accessibility. So we're looking to translate the tool into French and also into Spanish as well. The toolkit is built through multiple choice questions. So the MPA managers who are assessing their MPA will be provided with a selection of answers which have drop-down menus, and those answers supplied are awarded a particular score. And then those scores are used to generate an assessment of the MPA. So here's just an example of what some of those questions look like. And as I said, these questions and themes are linked to the core themes available in the fact sheets. So once you've completed your assessment, then you're presented with a dashboard which provides you an overview on the performance of your marine protected area. So as we can see in the radar graph, this current marine protected area example data is not performing as well as it should be in respect to its management framework. So moving on from the self-assessment tool, and the final sort of core component of the toolkit is we have good practices, and these good practices are being developed over time in respect to MPAs and the management of marine mammals. And it's essential that we compile and understand the best available practices with regards to marine protected areas, and whilst you're designing marine protected area management plans as well. So learning from other MPAs what has worked well in other areas, and whether that is areas adjacent to your MPA, or it might be, for example, in the Atlantic region, and you're looking to apply certain practices within the Southeast Asia region. And these good practices are in an accessible format, are available online to download. And this is just an example of one of the pages, which is nicely formatted, provides a good overview of information on the particular good practice, and can be downloaded and shared with partners. So I will just give you a very quick show of the toolkit online. So this is the platform that you'll be introduced with, www.marine-mammals.info. And you can see everything that we've spoken about is available here, plus other areas of the tool. So in terms of the website, which is what I wanted to show you, which we've just developed, this online platform, exactly the same. We collect metadata. These are downloadable drop-down menus and answers, guiding the MPA manager on how to assess their MPA. And if we access the example data, you can see the interactive nature of the dashboard, so you can really pull out your results of your MPA. And just to reinforce that link between the other elements, especially the fact sheets, when we come down to the MPA threats, we can see how the MPA is performing here. But then where we're underperforming, for example, marine mammal strandings, we can click and it links directly to the fact sheet to enable you to collect more information. So moving on from the toolkit, so the next steps, and I've mentioned a few already. So we're looking to develop new fact sheets, such as transboundary MPAs, important marine mammal areas, which we'll have a presentation on later, and also looking to develop those good practices. And we will develop an ability for other MPA managers to submit their good practices via the platform. But now we've done a lot of the work in terms of building the platform and the toolkit. What we'd really like to do is see that toolkit used and applied with MPAs. So we want to build a global assessment of marine protected areas. This can highlight key trends in MPAs, where MPAs are performing well, where there are those barriers, and also offer incentives for piloting the toolkit, looking at that sort of spatial assessment, but also developing those temporal assessments to monitor the performance of an MPA over time, but also so those MPAs can practice adaptive management with respect to their MPA management plans. And one thing that we're investigating is also looking at a certification or a badge for to show other MPA managers, or to show those that access the MPA that this MPA has been actively assessed for marine mammals, and it considers marine mammals within its design. And importantly, training and capacity building is critical. That we've developed this toolkit, we want it to be utilized, but how do we ensure that it is utilized, and where it's utilized, that it is done so correctly and as it was designed to do so. So we'll undertake lots of training and capacity building with MPA managers, and at the same time look to promote that toolkit, whether that is through conferences or meetings or working directly with MPA managers. So very quick rundown of the toolkit. If you have any specific questions or are interested in utilizing the toolkit, or would like to use some of the fact sheets or contribute to some material, you may have undertaken some studies or have some specific case studies from your MPA that will apply some of the fact sheet topics, they are more than welcome, and we actively encourage people to submit those. You can reach Francis and myself at the email on the screen. And I suppose most importantly, you can reach the toolkit via that URL that's available there. And one last thing, just to finish off the introduction, I'd just like to show you a animation that has been developed to introduce the toolkit even further. If I stop sharing, I believe IT will share that for me.
Marine mammals play a crucial role in marine ecosystem function and climate change resilience. Marine protected areas, MPA, are a common tool adopted to protect marine mammals. In order to empower practitioners, managers, and policymakers to effectively conserve marine mammals, the Ocean Governance Marine Mammal Twinning created a toolkit to guide the conservation of marine mammals through MPAs. Marine Mammals Management Toolkit contains 3 key components: fact sheets, self-assessment tool, and good practices. There are 23 available fact sheets within the toolkit that provide concise information, examples to common barriers, and guidance on solutions while directing to helpful resources. The self-assessment tool enables MPA managers to assess the extent to which marine mammals are included in their management plans. Accessible as an interactive tool, it facilitates the monitoring and evaluation of MPAs over time. The good practices have been designed to present key examples of good practices implemented throughout MPAs and the marine environment. Visit www.marine-mammals.info for more information. Share resources, suggestions, and good practices at ocean-governance@biodivcouncil.fr.
Perfect. Thank you very much. One thing that we were just discussing as well, that we could potentially explore to translate that animation, and I think that will be really valuable and allow us to increase the accessibility, but also increase the promotion of the toolkit. So hopefully that's provided you with a very brief introduction to the toolkit, and without being biased, it's an excellent toolkit, and we really hope to see it applied and utilized widely. So we've got about 5 minutes or so. If anybody has any questions, then please raise your hand, and we will unmute you. Okay, if we have no questions, then we'll move on. If you have any questions during either of the presentations, there are opportunities after each presentation to ask questions, but you can also use the chat function as well. Francis or I will pick it up in the chat, and then we'll either read out your question to benefit the translators, or we can, if you'd like to email your questions to the email address, then we can reply after the meeting, after the conference as well. So if we have no questions specifically on the toolkit, then we'll move on to our next speaker. So I'd like to introduce Edward Lyman. Edward Lyman is the natural resource specialist with the Hawaiian Islands Humpback Whale National Marine Sanctuary, and also serves as the regional large whale entanglement response coordinator under NOAA's Marine Mammal Health and Stranding Response Program. He's been involved in efforts to respond, study, and mitigate whale entanglements for more than 25 years. Ed, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Tom. Great introduction. And aloha, everyone. Let me go ahead and start sharing my screen here and get this going. Thanks for having me, by the way. And share and play. Hopefully this is up now. Yeah, I want to give you an example, a particular example on a cooperation between two regions, Alaska and Hawaii, focus on a particular population of animals, the humpback whales, and focus on a particular threat, entanglement threat, which I'm very much involved in. And it's just, I think, a great example of work with MPAs and reaching out beyond the boundaries at the same time, sort of transboundary efforts there. And I'm going to give you a little background here. I mentioned that I work for, well, actually Tom mentioned I work for the Hawaiian Islands Humpback Whale National Marine Sanctuary. And this is a sanctuary here of 5 discontinuous marine protected areas, about 4,800 square nautical kilometers, kilometers of protected waters there. And, you know, we have a particular focus on protecting humpback whales through education, research, and resource protection. And that's going to come into play here as I talk about entanglement threat and dealing with the response efforts and everything. But I wanted to get right to that connectivity with Alaska and reaching out beyond our particular MPA. Hawaii is the principal wintering ground where the animals, humpback whales, at least the majority of them in the North Pacific, will give birth, nurse their young, and breed. And the population is referred to as, well, either the Central North Pacific stock of humpback whales in the North Pacific or the Hawaii distinct population segment. And whereas Hawaii might be is the principal wintering ground, for the most part, Alaska is the principal feeding ground of that particular population. So here's that connection coming into play, a natural connection. And Tom mentioned the fact that I work with disentangling animals and a much broader response, by the way, 25 years of experience, over 100 responses, and about 60 whales I've helped cut free over the years, over that time frame. And that comes into play here because in part it's that expertise that we are sharing beyond our boundaries there, and again, to help protect the animals, our mandate. So, and that mandate, by the way, goes back to the mission statement of the sanctuary, and probably many of our mission statements, our goals, is the outreach side, increasing awareness, increasing stewardship there, release of some whales from life-threatening entanglements. In this case, there's your resource protection and gathering information, the science side of the response effort. Cutting whales free is not going to solve the problem. It's going to be much more than that. There's a lot of science going on behind it. And there we go. And I just wanted to point out there's a lot of challenges. It's really going to get to the impetus of why we've reached out, why we have these collaborations. One, I've mentioned the animals are, well, in this case, Pan-Pacific in their distribution. So we've got to reach out beyond. The threats are Pan-Pacific. The gear is not just in Hawaii, it's not just in Alaska, it's everywhere in between, the North Pacific garbage patch, for instance. And the impacts are typically not immediate. Now, there's 2 parts to this. The size of the animal itself on the direct response makes it a huge challenge, but also the fact that they are so big, they can carry gear off, like this video I hope is showing. This animal has carried gear from Alaska down to Hawaii, and that makes the information side, there's a disconnect in removal and time and space, and it makes it very challenging in that regard. And then they might be big, but they're just big needles in a very big haystack out there. And trying to get these data points towards this ultimate solution of gaining information is indeed very challenging. So, and here's an example. Now, I showed you the migration route earlier. Now I'm making another example of that connectivity between these two regions, Hawaii and Alaska. And in this case, the red lines represent gear the whales have carried from their feeding grounds, respective feeding ground, down towards, to Hawaii, where we've been able to get their reports. And the white lines, not as many that we know of, showing it the vice versa from Hawaii to Alaska. Okay. And again, our action plan here was to take this information, establish partnerships, collaborations. We call it Ohana in Hawaii, the family, and to address the threat and just really share that expertise. Now, I mentioned my expertise, but it works both ways. I'm gaining as much information as I'm providing. Share resources. There was limited resources when we started this up, again, 17 years ago. Increase the scope of the effort. The more questions you ask, the more answers you're going to get. And that's very valuable here. And again, the distribution of all the animals and the scope of the threat all has to be taken into account. Increase sample size. I've already given you a sense of just, again, the big needles and the big haystack and how, if you're going for information, it's hard to get, okay? And again, reducing a broad-based threat here. It's not just about the animals. There's threats to people, human side as well here, industries, for instance, socioeconomic aspects. And that gives us, or brings us to this Alaska detail, this collaboration between two regions. And this is just one of many examples. Partnership mainly between Office of National Marine Sanctuaries and NOAA Fisheries. They are the primary players. Again, we're sharing expertise. Mainly myself, I kind of migrate with the whales each and every year, lend a hand directly there. I'll give you more details in a second. But this collaboration includes everything from training, just general preparation for the response. So it involves the training, maintenance of gear, acquiring of gear, tools of the trade. The outreach side, again, there's many roles to play here. You need a foundation of outreach, and this science side, the research side as well. And the image there is right after our training, by the way. Everyone's doing a hands clear sign there up in Juneau, Alaska. So this is a busy slide, but it does a lot for us. I'm going to start out by pointing out those little yellow dots along the coast of the Alaska region there. Those are the confirmed reports of, historically speaking, of entangled whales coming in. And what we've done is we've basically looked for the appropriate team, the appropriate people, okay, because that's the primary resource is the people, to be candidates for responders, okay? Now, by the way, those same people are probably the reason why those dots are there. Okay? They probably help call those reports in, and they are the people that you would want to have in many cases to be these responders. You're strategically locating them. Of course, they overlap with the reports, and those orange spheres are kind of the areas of response. Some of those different dots are everything from full caches of equipment, everything you would need to cut a whale free, to rapid response kits, to telemetry, tags, to tag a whale and come back another day. And we've done well over 100 trainings everywhere, way out to the left of the screen, Dutch Harbor, all the way down to the lower right-hand corner in Ketchikan, Alaska. Over the years, over 250 people trained now, different levels, just like you're bringing an incident command system here. So their levels depend on their skill sets and the risks that they're taking. And the partnership goes beyond the agencies I mentioned. It's the non-governmental agencies, the researchers, fishermen, indigenous peoples there, the communities. So they're a big part of this as well. So, and of course, I think I mentioned equipment acquisition as well, and the maintenance of that equipment over time. So it's a big effort to maintain all this. And next slide. Just going to mention briefly, at least in my case, the direct role in the whales that are freed with this partnership. Really not that many, 6 whales additionally, I would say. But it's the indirect contribution, over 200 additional responses, over 60 additional animals freed of gear from that indirect contribution, this collaboration. And to give you another sense of the accomplishments here, and I'm combining the Hawaii and Alaska data, 330 responses, more than 100 whales freed from life-threatening entanglements now, again, combining those regions. Nearly 10,000 meters of line, measurably at least, removed from animals, and more than 220 sets of gear that has been either removed or documented off the animals. And there's an example of the science side again coming into play, not just about cutting whales free. And one more slide, time is limiting, but giving you a sense of what we've learned here. Again, sources of gear, I've mentioned it. Some of it's local, some of it's from far afield. They'll carry it across ocean basins. Most of it's fishing gear, but not all of it. A lot of it's fixed gear, by the way, whether it's fishing gear or not. Predominance of younger animals, maybe not, not being, haven't learned about the gear yet or anything. And that's another theme here, is that change. And that's where climate change might come into play, where that's causing habitat shifts, changes in food, prey sources, that might put the animals at a greater disadvantage, overlapping the gear or not being, again, used the novelty of that gear in that area now might be coming. And we're seeing this be a part of it, that is affecting other threats. The graphic on the left, by the way, just shows how the data sample sizes decrease very quickly as you want or look for greater detail. This is Hawaii data, by the way. And just to briefly mention that my title had something about managing marine mammals and tourism. I tweaked that a little bit here because in the context, I would argue it's more coordinating the on-water community as being opportunistic first responders. It's a very foundational role here. We depend on the on-water community to find those animals, to assess, document, monitor them, stand by. We don't lose the needle in the haystack out there. They play an important role. So it's increasing the scope even that much more. And they help us garner information. It's really citizen science in many, many ways, whether it's Hawaii or Alaska. And just want to point out the sanctuary has a very large blueprint, if you will, here. We've conducted hundreds of trainings. Now, some of these we've led, and some of these are beyond. I want to increase the scope here, the partnerships here have been other organizations or other people's leads. So more than 10 countries we've been involved in the North Pacific, some apprenticeships. So much broader scope here. I think I'll just go to the next slide and point out that in the US, at least, entanglement response, the large whale entanglement response is overseen nationally by the NOAA Fisheries Office of Protected Resources, their Marine Mammal Health and Strain Response Program. And then I want to put a plug in at the global scale here. Dave Matilla, under the Secretariat of the International Whaling Commission, has set up a global whale entanglement response network. So these examples just get broader and broader overall, and giving knowledge to some of the other players here in the field. So I think in summary, I forgot to hit my timer here, but in summary, the example I gave you provides connectivity, continuity between, looking at one species, humpback whales in a given region, and taking that and applying it towards a particular threat, entanglement threat, to, garner more assistance, more scope in answering questions as well, establishing a broader partnership and collaboration. It takes a team effort, second bullet there. Addresses limited resources and those information gaps, which were broad in scope for the large whale entanglement threat. So we needed to share information. So working together to reduce, again, what is a broad-based risk, everything using the response, which is key, to the research collaborations. And I think with that, I'm just going to throw up an acknowledgement slide. Again, the scope of this and the collaborations are very broad. And in Hawaii, it's mahalo, it's thank you. Thank you, guys. And hopefully I did stay within my time frame.
Thank you very much, Ed. That was fascinating. And yes, yeah, bang on time.
Beautiful. Thanks, Tom.
Excellent. Thank you very much. A fascinating presentation. It's great to see those figures on the number of whale entanglements directly that you relieve, but also those indirect involvements as well, and some really interesting considerations, especially for climate change and this learning trait as well, putting whales at a greater risk of entanglement. So we have 5 minutes in the agenda for questions. If anybody, if any of the attendees have any questions for Ed, then please do raise your hand, and we'll give you the floor to ask them. And I wonder, whilst people are just having a quick think and maybe trying to find the ability to raise the hand in a Zoom meeting, I have a few questions here, and I'm just wondering in terms of, well, from your experience, especially when coordinating with potentially other marine protected area managers, what have you found to be one of the greatest barriers, or maybe one of the biggest lacks in an MPA manager's capacity to be able to handle entanglements?
Okay, so the challenges between MPAs. Wow, I think, well, and I'm not sure if this is related, but it's one thing to establish these partnerships. It's a major challenge to maintain them over time. There's generally a big excitement early on. People, oh yeah, we'll do that. You know, we're in. But I mentioned 17 years, and I'm learning that it's much more work nowadays in the latter stages to maintain that partnership, that connectivity in so many ways. I mean, we learn more, we're better at it. We've laid the foundation down, but there's transitions, rotations, people moving in and out, whether it's leadership or your general support. And that takes a great deal of work. And that would be my advice to anyone else doing something like this. This networking that we do is another term, is maintenance of it. It's a major challenge. So it's a theme for me.
Yeah, no, definitely. And it's sharing that information, sharing that knowledge. And, you know, we're talking of big expanses here, big spaces, big areas of ocean. So ensuring that those knowledge channels are maintained is extremely valuable. And you mentioned just then in terms of excitement when you set up these links or these partnerships, but then things start to change over time. Are there any specific guidelines available or resources to people that may be listening to this and thinking maybe we should start to consider looking at entanglement and maybe working with other MPAs? Are there any specific guidelines or resources available?
Boy, yes, there is, and in so many different ways too. The broad scope of this, everything from I don't know, there's online courses on being a first responder. I've seen a lot on best practices. I know with the U.S., with the NOAA Fisheries Office of Particular Resources, I helped draft best practices on our broad large whale entanglement response efforts. Everything from cutting a whale free again to the science behind it. It's very broad. So, boy, those are two examples on both sides of the spectrum, I think, in some ways. Again, response-wise, keeping your emotions down, being a good first responder, the do's and don'ts. Two, best practice of actually cutting a whale free in many ways. Yep. So,
okay. Excellent. Yeah, and I think you mentioned there about developing the best practices side of things, and as we mentioned in introduction, that's one area of our toolkit as well that we'll be looking to expand. So we'll definitely be in touch to collaborate and develop some resources. We have a couple of minutes, and we've just had a chat that's come through. So I think we'll ask this one, and then we'll finish. It's not really related to whale entanglement, more so the sanctuary, but how the sanctuary in Hawaii reduces the risk of whale collision with large commercial vessels, and do you have any resources available for that?
Okay, you know, our data, real quickly, the data showing it's really, at least for reporting wise, that we know of, it hasn't been the large vessels. It's been a little different than, say, some of the other regions. Say East Coast US or the West Coast even of the US for that matter. It's been vessels that have been 65, well, I'm gonna have to get the feet here, 65 feet or less in reporting. So it's changed the look here we've had. And yet at the same time, well, I'll also say a lot of those vessels, at least on the reporting side, are the tourist industry. I know we had that in my title. And we are looking at additional speed guidance, reducing that down to say 15 knots. Even around the animals, on the approach and departure of the animal. I noticed that about 17% of the reports that we were receiving, the sanctuary was receiving, the contact was occurring around the approach and departure of the animal. Maybe a time where the operator had been watching the whale, but not watching the other whales, had lost that image map, around them and then pulls away to head back to the harbor and hits a whale in the process. So we're talking about lowering speeds of down to even lower 6 knots when you're within 400 meters of an animal, of a group of humpback whales in this case. So we are looking at additional guidance and we have the 100-yard rule, by the way. Just don't approach within 100 yards, which might help. So some aspects. Good question, Tom.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Ed. And once again, thank you for such a fascinating presentation. And people that are attending, feel free to get in touch with Ed, or you can get in touch with Francis and I, and we'll put you in contact to continue those conversations.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ed. So moving on to our second or third speaker. So I'd like to introduce Pierre Vinez from MedPan. So Pierre is the MPA support manager for MedPan Secretariat, who is responsible for the implementation of the strategy decided by the General Assembly. MedPan is a network of marine protected area managers in the Mediterranean that gathers 131 institutions from 21 Mediterranean countries. Pierre, the floor is yours. Over to you.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. So I will let you share my presentation here. I will here give you a brief presentation on the contribution of our network, MedPan, that is the network of marine protected area managers in the Mediterranean, for the conservation of marine mammals in the region. So I will be super brief, and well, even Tom, you just reminded what MedPan is, and I know that from my president, Purificación Canals, and my colleague Susan Gallon, you already have heard quite a lot about MedPan. So you all are very aware of what our network is. You were just reminding, which is on a couple of slides after this one. So we can go to the third slide, please. Yes, that the network up to date gathers 131 organizations. Just to mention that among these 131 organizations that are based in 21 countries around the Mediterranean basin, most of them are members that are all MPA management bodies, and others are partners of the network that are either public institutions, that are intergovernmental organizations, that are NGOs, the big ones working at the regional level, but also small field NGOs that are supporting MPAs in conducting monitoring activities and management activities. So that's it about MedPan, really. And I will more focus on the subject, on today's subjects. So for a few years now, MedPan is developing and supporting activities that are bringing together both MPAs, but all the stakeholders that are working on marine mammals to help as much as we can as a network implement an integrating conservation strategy for these species. So here, what you can see on the map, the orange patches that you can see on the map are data that were gathered as a result of a workshop of the IUCN Marine Mammals, Important Marine Mammals Areas Task Force in 2016. That was a workshop for identifying these important marine mammal areas. And the map shows how it overlaps with these little dots that are data that we gathered, MedPan together with our partner, the SPARAC, that are identifying here the MPAs that are either considering marine mammals as target species for conservation, that for some of them have been designated for their conservation, that also for some of them are conducting monitoring activities, and only for a few of them, really few of them, unfortunately, are implementing conservation measures. However, this shows what is the potential contribution of MPAs in the dynamics of an integrating conservation strategy in the IMAS, in the region. Well, as we all know, MPAs are an effective, very effective, can be a very effective tool for the conservation of mobile species, but of course, they are only part of the solution. We know that dealing with the conservation of species that know no borders requires to take coordinated action beyond the local level. which of course makes the added value of network-based approaches quite obvious. And that's what we are trying to push here with the MedPan network. So we can go, I guess, to the next slide. So to take action, we have equipped the network with thematic working groups on different topics. One of them is a mobile species working group, which we actually started a few years ago as a marine turtle working group, but which we then extended as a mobile species working group that is coordinated by a tandem of MPA managers and key partners with an objective that is twofold. That is, first, to provide the network, the MedPan Secretariat, with an in-depth and permanent expertise on the topic to help for the development and implementation of the network activities that can range from designing training courses to drawing policy papers. And the other part of the objective of this mobile species working group is also to advise and to provide direct technical support to MPAs that are conducting activities on the topic as part of ongoing projects. If we go to the next slide, I will just briefly tell you also how we approach these working groups. So they are composed, and this is something very important, of a majority of MPA managers, because indeed there are many already working group on cetacean, on marine turtles, but here the difference for us is really to ensure that there is a majority of MPA managers, as well as, of course, other profiles, but this is to ensure the consistency with MPA needs and challenges. So we try to ensure that the group includes a diversity of profiles with different expertise and experience, covering, of course, all the topic-related issues and knowledge on the different mobile species that are targeted, to have a strong link with the ongoing projects. So, for example, we always ensure in this working group that MPAs that are indeed conducting pilot activities are part of the group. We try to, as much as possible, also ensure a link with other MPA networks that either are at the national, sub-regional, or other regional networks of MPAs. And of course, since these working groups are being considered as an advisory body that is that is part of the MedPan governance, we try to ensure link with other MedPan governance bodies, such as our board of director and scientific committee. So trying that, like, people from the scientific committee, for example, of MedPan are part of the group. And of course, this is a general concern as a regional network to ensure good geographical balance, and also here to have a group that is reasonably sized, because of course the point is to meet, even though these days was mainly online. We need to keep it dynamic, and for this, keep it within a reasonable number of people. On the next slide, I will be here. So the group is assisting and supporting ongoing activities that we are conducting on mobile species and that are focused around three axes. The first axis, knowledge, which is to provide baseline data to develop and support effective conservation strategies. So we are maintaining, in particular, a database, geodatabase, together with our partner, the SPARAC. And also we are updating every 4 years the status of MPAs. It's, of course, to build capacities that contribute to scaling up site protection across Mediterranean MPAs and beyond. So this stands with experience sharing workshop, exchange visits, the development of guidelines, of best practice, and also trainings. And I will tell you a little more about this just after. And finally, on a more strategic level, it is also about advocating at the regional and international levels to secure the long-term buy-in for marine mammals conservation. So policy, recommendation, communication, and such activities. On the next slide, I will mention that 3 years ago, if we can go to the next slides, we held our annual experience sharing workshop on managing highly mobile species across Mediterranean MPAs. If we can go back just to the workshop, Very briefly, I will not go through all the recommendations that came out, be sure, of course. Just to mention that this workshop is for us very important. It's a very important step of our strategy as a network, as from year to another on a different topic, it allows us to take stock of the needs, of the expertise among the MPAs on the topic that is addressed. So here was on highly mobile species. And it is a crucial moment to pool and share knowledge, experience, and also to initiate joint activities. So I will not, of course, go through the 67 recommendations that are mentioned here, but for those of you who might be interested in reading through these recommendations, I will share with you in the chat the proceedings of the workshop that you have available here now in the chat. On the next slide, I will tell you about another important activity that we are developing as part of our network, and that is quite recent also. We are now gradually, we are currently setting up gradually a regular training program that is, in terms of capacity building, quite different from what we were used to do as a network, because most of our capacity building activities were based on experience sharing. Here, the focus is much more operational. It's to build operational capacities of MPAs. So we are conducting this training program in a partnership approach, meaning that we are not developing all training modules by ourselves, but in the logic of a common shared catalog of training, we are working together with other partners that are also developing training on different topics. And to be permanent, we felt the need of gradually implementing this training program in 5 different MPAs around the basin, which you can see here on the map, that are acting as training centers. One of the topics of the training is mobile species, including a training cycle on cetacean and another one on marine turtles. So on the next slide, I will mention this first training that we developed last year on cetacean conservation across Mediterranean MPAs. That is a highly operational training that we developed together with Port National Park and with Miraceti, with the support of Miraceti, our consultant here. The first session, despite the difficult times we went across, was held in October 2020 in Port National Park in France. As a 5 days training that was including 3 days in classroom and 2 days in the field at sea on a sailing boat, which gathered 4 trainees from Croatia and Italy. So it's a small number of trainees, but due to the very strong field component of such training, the point is, of course, to keep it like to a very small number of trainees. We cannot do much more. And we received for these trainees, in response to the call for expression of interest, we sent out 65 applications. And of course, here is to mention that, while this is a point in a regular training program, this training is intended to be repeated over time. But on the next slide, better than words, and here I will conclude my presentation with this short movie that I invite you to watch now. That is a 4 minutes, a short movie presenting this training, which I think summarizes quite well the approach of our network to the conservation of mobile species, and here cetacean. Thank you very much.
Okay, so the objective of the mission is to collect data on cetaceans frequenting the area. In my MPA, MPA Telaščica in Croatia, we know that the species of bottlenose dolphin frequent this area, but we don't have the monitoring program established. So I decided to come here to learn how to develop a monitoring protocol, and also how to maybe put some of the activities concerning the monitoring of the dolphins in our management plan that we are going to develop new one next year. It's really important for MPA managers to be able to evaluate the conservation status of cetacean population frequency in the areas and the impact of human activities on the population in order to be able to design and implement conservation strategies.
This training is part of a regular training program that MedPan is gradually implementing with as a general purpose to help build the operational capacity of MPAs. So the program is already and will be in the future implemented in several training centers based all around the Mediterranean, such as Porto National Park where we are now.
So we try to give managers keys and tools to be able to implement concretely monitoring and conservation in their MPAs. And to do this, we did 2 days in classroom, one the first day and one the last day, and 3 days on board and sailing boat in order to experiment in real situations the data collection.
During 3 days of lectures, we learned about cetacean species in the Mediterranean, about how to assess their abundance, their density. Now here, as today from the boat, we are living all this really nice, how these methods are applied in the field. So we are learning how to watch the sea, 3 of us rotating every half an hour and trying to see them with binoculars. And also when we spot them, we also then make photos and videos, and we also got material about how to prepare management strategy and monitoring strategy. So I think that it will be very helpful for our MPA, and I can pass this to my colleagues.
We learned in theory how to do and what to expect, but then on the field we saw that sometimes it's not so easy, it's not so simple. But again, our trainees have shown us how to act in each situation.
This kind of training is very important from a regional point of view and from a Mediterranean point of view, because it will contribute to the establishment of a network of well-trained expert MPAs and will truly improve knowledge on cetaceans, which is the main objective of ACOVA.
Cetacean and mobile species in general require approaches and strategies beyond boundaries. Purpose of this training program is to help me with this fly that is on my forehead.
And that's it.
Perfect. Thank you, Pierre, for a very interesting presentation. And there's some really excellent points. And I'd love to spend lots of time going through and discussing all those elements. But as we always are in these types of calls and Zoom meetings, we're quite short on time. So, but I do have one question that I think is important to very quickly ask for the participants in the meeting. And you mentioned in terms of the topics, you have fisheries, financing, cetacean, marine turtles, etc., and also the training side of things. How are those topics selected? But also, are those training materials available? Can people access those materials?
Yeah. So about the selection of the topic, if you mean like the general topic that we are focusing on for the thematic working groups for the training, so fisheries, financing, mobile species, are topics that are currently at the core of our strategy. Of course, we do not intend to limit to these few topics. There should be thematic working groups within a network of MPA managers on almost all topics, but we cannot be everywhere. Other partners have also started thematic working groups, so it's not needed always to reinvent the wheel. So here we felt that on these topics, mobile species, fisheries, and financing in particular, where we are really focused currently in our strategy, it was important to have this permanent in-depth expertise, as I said. So within each of these topics, and then choosing the focus of trainings, for example, is another subject of importance. So I was mentioning that one key step in the sequence of our capacity building activities is this annual experience sharing workshop that helps to detect, identify where are the needs, where are the level of expertise. This is where we start usually to have this first rough assessment of where are the needs and the expertise within our network. Then the recommendation that I shared with you in the proceedings are reflecting a lot of these needs in terms of capacity building, on which we based, together with the support of the mobile species working group, to help refine what should be the scope and the priorities in developing training. And of course, when we talk about the training cycle on cetacean conservation, for example, it will not stand in one training module. There will be several that we will gradually develop through time, with the idea of providing MPAs with complementary training modules that are arranged together to provide them with a comprehensive learning pathway to gradually build their capacity and improve their capacity in managing mobile species, cetacean here. We have the same approach more or less for all the topics. Provide a comprehensive learning path to MPAs through a range of different training modules. And the second question, are the training materials available? So yes, everything we produce is freely available, even though for some of the training like this one we saw on cetacean conservation through the short movies, as you understand, this training has a very strong field component. So there is nothing that can be, there is no standalone material such as, for example, the toolkit that is produced as part of your project, the Ocean Governance Project, that here can really be helpful. But for other trainings that are more online or that can be considered also as self-directed trainings, there are materials that can indeed, as standalone, can be very useful and that are all freely accessible from the MedPan website.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Pierre. And as I said, I'd love to sit and talk for quite a while, but we are short on time. If anybody has any questions, then please feel free to drop those into the chat. And Pierre, I'm sure you can work your way through those and answer them in the chat as well. Thank you very much again for such a brilliant, insightful presentation.
Excellent.
Excellent. So moving on to our fourth speaker. So I'd like to introduce Eric Hoyt. Eric is the research fellow with the Whale and Dolphin Conservation and founder and co-director of the long-term Far East Russia Orca project in the Kamchatka and the Commander Islands. Author of 25 books and more than 40 research papers, he co-chairs the IUCN Marine Mammal Protected Area Task Force, which is rolling out a global scientific tool map to habitats over 130 marine mammal species. Eric, pleased to give you the floor. All yours.
Oh, thanks a lot. I'll just figure out how to share my screen. Let's see, desktop one. Wonder if this is going to work. Are you seeing that now?
We are not, no.
Oh boy.
We do have a copy of your presentation.
Yeah,
that would be easier.
Maybe you better go with that then.
Okay, no problem.
Wait, let me try this. Share screen. Yeah, I don't know why it's not working. Sorry.
Not
Okay.
a problem at all. Okay, so we should be seeing my screen now.
Okay. You've got it? Okay, so I'll just say click. So hello everyone. I'm really happy to be able to introduce our tool of important marine mammal areas and talk about the status of IMAs in Southeast Asian seas and how IMAs, I'm using that important marine mammal area acronym liberally, and how they might be used to help build marine mammal spatial networks, drawing on the examples of the Atlantic and previous twinning project. So next slide. So in 2013, we set up an IUCN task to focus on the habitats of the 130 species of marine mammals. Next slide. And we put together a group, initially just the two of us co-chairing at the top, Giuseppe and myself, and have gradually built up this secretariat and task force regional coordinators that I'll talk about in a minute, but also noting that we have 4 objectives, but really this last objective of trying to enhance capacity with new conservation tools has become dominant in terms of the IMA tool. Next slide. So the important marine mammal area tool was developed with consultation of more than 1,000 experts over a 2 or 3 year period, and we came up with criteria that broadly matches CBD EBSs, ecologically or biologically significant areas, as well as key biodiversity areas, but they are not. We're not doing something that is based on the numbers, on the hard numbers like key biodiversity areas. Important marine mammals areas are place-based conservation tool. That's our definition. Discrete portions of habitat important for one or more marine mammal species that have the potential to be delineated and managed for conservation. They're not marine protected areas, and they're not identified on the basis of management considerations. And it's very important to say that they are evidence-driven, pure, and it's a purely biocentric process. There's no political or socioeconomic input. And we like to say this is what the animals themselves would want if we could, in terms of the best science that we can put together. So we have a 3-stage process. We come up with preliminary areas of interest, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. Then we have a stage 2 when we go into a workshop, a week-long workshop with 20 to 50 experts from a given region, and come up with candidate IMAs, and then they go for peer review. Next slide. This is what we've done so far. We've addressed 6 regions and 7 regions now. And next slide. The next one we're doing, we just completed the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea that was announced just a few ago. And we're going next in the spring to the Eastern Tropical and Temperate Pacific, and hoping for the South Atlantic. We have funding now for that in Southwest Atlantic. And then continuing on from there as funding becomes available. 173 IMAs identified globally. You can see the yellowish orange areas on the map, and the red areas are areas that remain as candidate IMAs, still need some attention. And then the blue areas are AOI, areas of interest, that we keep on the map that failed to become IMAs but are still important for consideration in the future. And this just shows you if you click on any area, you get a little fact box, and then there are links to further information that you can obtain, and you can download the shape files, and all the information is available to everyone. In the 7 regions examined so far, we've involved 205 experts, and we've now looked at 35% of global waters. And that amounts to about 17% of the examined areas covered by IMA, or 62 species, 18 of them threatened. So about half of the marine mammals. So I've put a list of things here, because some of the outputs of IMAs, we're still a fairly young tool, but we've been formally recognized by parties to the Convention on Migratory Species with a resolution, which you can see here, and following a task force, ACABAM's workshop in Greece, and to use AIS data to a threat from ship strikes. A few other things I'll mention. In East Kalimantan, Indonesia, a long-term study helped identify Balikpapan Bay as an IMA, and this declaration coincided with the coastal zonation plans being put forward, giving really international attention to protect this habitat for endangered Irrawaddy dolphins. IMA identification contributed to the creation of MPAs in Bangladesh, leading to the June 2019 declaration of the Nijam Dwip MPA and National Park. And there's also been recognition of IMA status in Malaysia, with IMAs being incorporated into policy documents, including the National Policy on Biological Diversity, as well as Satun Langkawi IMA in the Perlis Integrated Shoreline Management Plan, and the Mersing Archipelago IMA in the Mersing Special Area Plan. All of these prepared by the government of Malaysia, which is really encouraging. We've also noticed mentions of IMAs, whether they're present or not, in environmental impact assessment documents in Malaysia. Next slide. So this gives you an idea of what we have at the beginning of, before the workshop starts. This is some of the areas that are identified, and after the workshop, as areas are nominated to be candidate IMAs, this is what it looks like. And then finally, the review results give you something that looks like this. But I'll go back to that first image with all the submissions shown on the map. I think this is a pretty interesting way to look at a potential network for marine mammals in a given region. If you look here at this, all the areas here, EBSAs, 17 EBSAs, 21 KBAs, 26 MPAs, 28 AOI, they're all have marine mammal content, and we could really consider all of them as part of the resource that we have available, even though only relatively few of those become IMAs. These are just a few entries for the MPAs with marine mammals, and of course all these are on the stationhabitat.org website, and the marine mammal habitat.org website has all the final ones, but these could be accessed, and this would be a way of really extending the network. So our goals for the network of IMAs is to introduce a monitoring feature so that we can get baseline data and keep track of threats to these areas and other developments, very much like the how is your MPA doing, those kind of approaches to gathering data and keeping it up to date. The task force is currently preparing a monitoring best practice document, and that will probably toward the end of next year, we'll be trying to roll that out with some field work. And of course, developing a research plan for each IMA, candidate IMA and AOI would be ideal. Also, last thing I want to note is that the task force has a regional group for the Northeast Indian Ocean, Southeast Asian seas, organized by 3 regional coordinators, which is helps inform the task force and to keep things going with the IMAs in these areas. So these 3 scientists are from Indonesia, the Philippines, and Malaysia, and could be a good resource for all of us. So I'll stop there with a list of our sponsors, but please check out the website.
Thank you very much, Eric. And it wouldn't be a Zoom meeting without some technical issues. But thank you again for a fascinating presentation. And we are quite short on time, but I just want to pick up on something that you mentioned towards the end, and looking at developing these best practice documents and the training involving field work and looking at these research plans. Is there a way in which people can stay up to date on the progress of those developments? Is there a newsletter or a mailing list?
Well, we have, I think, the website. We regularly put out news on the website, and we put it out through Twitter and Facebook, and so you can follow our social media and through the news section. I would, probably every 1 to 2 months we put something out.
Perfect, thank you. And you mentioned the regional group for the Asian, Southeast Asian region. Is that static in its nature, or can people that are interested maybe contribute into those discussions, maybe picking up on case studies or best practice that they've learned from their marine protected areas?
Well, the group the group is actually all the people who were at the workshop, and the coordinators are coordinate that larger group of say 40 or 50 people. And actually, we have now in the Black and Caspian Sea an initiative to expand that particular group, and we always envisioned that it could get larger, and I think we will try and roll it out to a wider group. The task force isn't necessarily open for future members, and because that's a whole IUCN process with getting people involved that way, but the regional group could be open, and we'd like to do that. So I'm glad you mentioned that.
Wonderful, excellent. And the same with all the presentations. We'd love to sit here and discuss and chat through for hours, but unfortunately we are quite short. But if anybody does have any questions for Eric, please feel free to use the chat, or as always, reach out to ourselves or reach out directly to Eric by email to continue those discussions. And especially if you're looking to open up some of those opportunities, then I think it will be really valuable for the people on this call as well. So thank you very much, Eric.
Thank you.
Excellent. So moving on to our final speaker of the day, I'd like to introduce Imam Fauzi, who's an MPA manager for 8 national MPAs in East Indonesia, and one of them is Savusi MPA in East Nusa Tenggara province. It handles stranded marine mammals that often occur in the Savu Sea and provided socialization and education to the community about the protection of marine mammals. Imam, the floor is yours.
Hello?
We can hear you.
You can hear me?
We can.
Oke, thank you. Terima kasih untuk kesempatan malam hari ini. Pertama, ucapkan selamat pagi, selamat siang, dan selamat malam untuk para peserta yang hadir pada Zoom kali ini. Perkenalkan, saya Imam Fauzi, MPA Manager untuk Laut Sawu, Taman Nasional Perairan Laut Sawu yang ada di Nusa Tenggara Timur, Indonesia. Saya ingin share screen.
I'd like to share my screen right now. Okay.
Taman Nasional Laut Sawu.
The Sawu National Marine Park has an area of 3.35 million, is located at the Nusa Tenggara Timur province. On the target of conservation is marine mammals, sea turtles, manta rays, coral reefs, seagrass, and mangrove. And this is the potential that we've identified. 5 or 6 years we've managed the MPA. You can see around 500 species of coral reef, and there's also more than 10 species of seagrass and 15 species of mangroves. You can also see high economic value fish like groupers and tuna.
Menemui cetacea. Di sini dari hasil pengamatan yang kami lakukan ada 12 jenis.
We've monitored around 12 species, and there's also 4 whales species. An emergence of around 2,393 times in a period of 2013 to 2021. And we can also find manta rays in the Endau Island, in the East Manggarai. And there are 6 species of sea turtles.
Kemudian juga whale shark, paus,
and whale shark.
Dan Taman Nasional Laut Sawu ditetapkan oleh pemerintah.
National Park of Sawu was declared the Indonesian government to protect the migration route of Cetacea and Lister of whales. As we can see on the screen, there are around 38% are colored purple are the protected areas. Next, the red areas, there are 2 large zones in the middle, and this is designated as the central zone for the protection of the Cetacea. And I need to say here that the Sawu Sea has been designated as an MPA to protect the migration of the Cetacea. These are the 35 Cetacea that are in the world, you can see that there are 16 that you can find in the South Sea. Why South Sea has become important as a habitat, as a place to live for cetacea, become a migration route, because the location itself is very unique. We can find a lot of fish larvae, the distribution of fish larvae. The depth of the house is around 3,000 meters. And there's also, it also borders the Indians on the south. And this has an effect with high plankton abundance of the itself. Based on our observation, there are two main corridors. The first one with high frequency is Sumba Timur, Kupang, and Southwest Sumba. And there's low frequencies in Central Sumba, West Sumba, Rotendao, and Sabu Raijua. Next, in activity, we done monitoring with ecological assessment, and we also use dynamic surveys. And we also put them in areas with high frequencies of sightings, and we also use ecological tracking. And our survey activities or monitoring that we have conducted, there is minimal 4 people. One here in the front. The equipment that we use is usually first a map to determine the tracking when we conduct a survey. And we also use a GPS and a recording device, and also a monitoring device and something to monitor the quality of water. Aside from that, we also use a hydrophone. From our monitoring, visual monitoring that we do, we can use this tool to see where the whales are. And for documentation, we use a camera. And to make movies, we use a handycam and also use drones to see the area from above, from the capacity at some degree. So we use equipment that is valuable, and so we can see many individual whales or a group of dolphins. We can see them, monitor them from the drones we use. We also do participating mapping with fishermen that operate in the Sawu Ocean Sea. Based on mapping and monitoring that we've done, we've tried to map when the sightings of the cetacea at the South Sea, where their migration routes go. And we try to map this and this is conducted by interviews from the people, and this is what is on the map. And there's a movement on the graphs from the south to the north around June, around when the summer moves from Australia, and on December from June, we've noticed that they will move back and forth as in 1 year. The sightings of the whales in 2017, as we pay attention on the blue is for blue whales, green, there's purple. That's the sightings that we have recorded from 2013 to 2020. The most whales I've seen is blue whales and pygmy sperm whales. The time of appearance is around 7 to 10 a.m. We noticed there were other 2 whales. There's also humpback whales and sperm whales. But we can see the most sightings we've seen is the blue whales, followed by pygmy sperm whale, and followed by whales that we could not identify. Now these are for the species of dolphins that we've noticed from 2013 to 2020. The most sightings that we've seen is from the spinner dolphin, and that it occurs around 7 to 10 a.m. and around 3 to 6 p.m. And then there is 12 species of dolphins. And you can see on the map is the area of the spottings. And you can find them every day, which is different from whales, where they are mostly, it depends on their migration period, but whales, you can see them every day. So I'd like to say that the most sightings we've seen is a spinner dolphins, around 2,919, followed by spotted dolphins and bottlenose dolphin, Fraser dolphins, melon-headed whale, and based on the observations we've done, we've seen many potentials that we could develop, especially for whale watching tourism. We can map out a few locations that we can designate as areas for marine mammal watching. We'd like to start from dolphins. That's what we can offer because their sightings are frequent in those areas. We can start from Matek and Pulau Timor. And if you like to see whales.
Imam, I'm very sorry, we're running very late and it has been way over 10 minutes. If you can, like 2 minutes left to conclude your presentation. I really apologize about this. And
maaf, Imam, waktunya sangat sempit sehingga Anda harus cepat ke konklusi dari presentasi Anda. Maaf sekali, terima kasih.
And this is for the location of the Samoa Island. This is the Rotendao. And this is the 4th Jiwu village. We will develop to observe whale watching as a tourism site. And we have a strategy, at least 5, that we'd like to develop. The marine mammals in Sulawesi, including the development of usage of it. But we do not know the direction of which we will develop it because we are very limited in resources and information for the migration routes itself. And we would also like to build an information center for whales and marine mammals in East Nusa Tenggara Timur. So anyone who would like to study about those animals could come here. And we would like to manage, and because we manage migratory species, and I'm sure in and for participation from society, we plan to use tourism, and we also need best practices to make a protocol to enhance the tourism. This is what is trending in the Sulawesi. As we can see, there are more strandings, or 17 cases, around 2010 to 2020, and most of them have died. Many of them were buried, and we also involved the people, the local people. And this is for the information center. We've also started for the stranded marine mammals. We can also bury and also use as for educational purposes. And we are still looking for donors who are looking to help build this information center. And we are also cooperating with the Gajah Mada University. And we also cooperate with the Gajah Mada University to evacuate those bones and set them up to be displayed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Imam. An excellent presentation. And unfortunately, we had to speed up through some sections. But I've seen the presentation, and there's some excellent material in there. So I would encourage everybody who's attending the call who has questions to get in touch with Imam to discuss the activities in the sea. And what we will do, we'll also collect the presentations that we've seen today, and we'll host those on the Toolkit website and platform as well, so everybody can review all this information. Pak Imam, I'd love to open the floor to questions, but we are quite far behind in our schedule. So as always, please feel free to send questions, and we'll pass those to the speakers, and we'll get responses back to you as well. So on that note, thank you once again, Pak Imam, and we will we'll host all those presentations online so everybody could review the information. And very quickly, it's then up to me to conclude the technical side of this session. And once again, I'd like to thank all the speakers for today, and to everybody attending. We hope you found it incredibly interesting, and hopefully it's ignited some further interest or highlighted some areas that that can be explored for your marine protected areas. I'd also like to again thank the speakers, because we understand it was very short notice in this invitation for you to prepare those sessions as well. So thank you once again. And the last thing from myself and Francis is we're always looking for contributions. If you're interested in testing the toolkit or applying it in your MPA, then please get in touch. Or if you have case studies, good practices, or would just like to have a discussion about the toolkit, we would be more than happy to schedule a call and open that up. So on that note, again, thank you very much. And Puri, back over to you, I believe.
Yes, thank Tom. Just to say thank you to all of you for your presentations, and I'm sure that we can go in deep in the future with other events and bilateral exchanges with the responsible organizers of this session. So just to say that for all the participants that we continue tomorrow with 3 more sessions. Two of them that are the second part of what we started yesterday on supporting MPA management at regional and national scale by networking and other models. Then we have as well a session on restoration of marine and coastal habitats in MPAs. And the last one about agreements for transboundary cooperation. So we hope to see all of you there tomorrow and just have a nice time. See you. Thank you.